Welcome to Solutions with Courtney Anderson. I am your host, Courtney Anderson. Today's show is one of our Law Lovers Lounge series. And of course, our Law Lovers Lounge is because we love the law. And how can we not? The rule of law is ideally what gives us all the right to equal treatment, gives us the right to be able to be who we are and express our opinions and live how we want to live and have the confidence that we're going to be treated the same as everybody else and afforded the same opportunities and consequences of everyone else in society. So it's an idea that if it's executed as it is intended to be, that I will get the opportunity to be an individual and unique, and yet at the same time know that I'm going to be subject to the same protections that everybody else has. That's the idea. So we're law lovers, and it's a lounge because, of course, we're just having some general, generic, educational discussion. This is not legal advice. I am not your lawyer. Again, always have to make these disclaimers on these shows. I am an attorney, but if you have not signed a contract with my law firm, I am not your lawyer. This does not constitute legal advice. This is just an educational program for the general public. So the topic of our show today is, uh-oh, I've been pulled over by the police. Now what? So we're in our Law Lovers Lounge, and again, our topic is, uh-oh, I've been pulled over by the police. Now what? As we do in all of our Law Lovers Lounge, the specific nuances of the laws vary by jurisdiction all over the world. So within the United States, there are different rules within each individual state and within individual counties and within individual parishes. These are sort of subsections of states, and there are individual rules within different cities and municipalities. It's the same thing in other countries. So there's not one generic law that I can describe that is all 100% applicable everywhere, because we have all these nuances. That's why whenever somebody has a legal issue and you ask somebody who's a lawyer for advice, they'll tell you need to talk to a lawyer in your jurisdiction, and they're not trying necessarily to not answer your question, but the reality is the most accurate answer depends on where you are in the world and what you're talking about, and the rules change in terms of nuance depending on where you are. And so there's not a person on the planet who knows the law in every single jurisdiction of the planet, because there's so many different countries, and then there's so many different territories within those countries, and so many different, levels of jurisdiction. It's just a lot to learn. But there are frameworks that are similar. Framework is what? Like the big picture. The nuances is, exactly how many days somebody has to do this, exactly what the exact fine is for this punishment. But the big picture of legal systems is sort of generically applicable in most parts of the world. So today's question has to do with the idea of criminal law, and an idea is that there's two general parts of the legal system, the civil section and the criminal section. A civil law is something where the punishment is not going to include incarceration or jail. A civil wrong is something where the punishment is going to make you stop doing something. They're going to enjoin you from doing something, or they're going to compel you to do something. They're going to say you have to follow through with a contract, for example, or they're going to make you have to pay some sort of money as punishment for the bad thing you did. In the criminal justice system, you violate these laws, the punishment can be money. Usually it's a fine, so the government will have money that in theory you're paying to the society. It is a fine for the bad criminal violation that you did. And the most important distinction is in criminal law, the punishment can include incarceration. And in some parts of the world, a few, very small minority, but in the U.S., including in this tiny minority of countries, it could be incarceration, and it can be up to death, where the government can actually take your life. So here we are talking about our criminal system in general. Criminal laws, again, big distinction you always want to remember, no matter where you are in the world, whether you live there, you're on vacation, or working. Criminal law, the punishment can include incarceration, and in some parts of the world, the incarceration can include punishment up to life, being incarcerated for forever, or in some very few parts of the world, it can include being executed. The government will actually take your life as punishment for the crime. So that is something that I would typically pay attention to if I'm out and about in the world. And again, I don't know all of the different criminal laws in the world. I don't even know all the different criminal laws in all the different U.S. jurisdictions. There's just too many of them. But of course, I am a licensed attorney. I know the big picture, and I understand as I've practiced what they call criminal defense. Criminal defense is the lawyer who represents the person against the government. So in a criminal case, the way they're all styled is it's the person, the individual person. Sometimes it's a group of people if you have co-defendants, but typically a person against the government. You're against the people, the government. So in England, for example, it would be you against the crown. It's you against the government. In the States, it's you against the government. So you against the United States of America. It'll literally read criminal case. If you're the criminal, it'll read the United States of America versus Courtney Anderson. If I'm charged with federal offenses, it'll read the state of Texas versus Courtney Anderson if it's a state crime. It's the government. I've wronged the society. And that's why it's me against the government. And that's a huge disparity in power. If you think about it, just sort of generically, like, wow, the one person or a few people up against the entire, either entire nation, or up against the subset of the nation, a state or county or parish or smaller group. It's still a huge, disparity in power. So the criminal defense lawyer represents the defendant, which is the person, and I'm up against the government. And so the government has their own lawyers to represent them, and they work for the government. That's their full-time job is to represent the people. The people, of course, are the government. We the people. So the criminal defense lawyer represents the one person up against the government. This is not an easy task in terms of resources, and sometimes people are very unhappy with me, and they'll say things to me like, well, how could anybody represent someone who's guilty? As if criminal defense lawyers, wake up in the morning and their only mission when they go to work is to go find horrible, bad people who do horrible, bad things and then just, be happy about that. That's not how I perceive it, and it's not how anybody I've ever known perceives it. The criminal defense person's job is to defend the person, but I'm defending the system. The government is the person bringing the charge, and so they have the responsibility to meet their burden of proof. The burden of proof is a legal standard that you have to meet to prevail on your claim. And in criminal cases, it's in most, it's beyond a reasonable doubt. They have to prove that, and when it's one person and one lawyer, or one small law firm up against the government, and in theory, look at the resources the government has, right? It's a difficult challenge. But what the criminal defense lawyer is trying to do is ensure that the government is doing what they're supposed to, right? Is there an abuse of power somewhere? Are they following all the procedure? Are people being just sort of railroaded and having their rights trampled all over, especially if they're somebody who's not powerful? To me, that's an awesome opportunity, and I think it's one of the most important functions in a system that really works. If you have rule of law, or even a semblance of rule of law, there needs to be some sort of contest. If you look at some of the statistics in some countries, the conviction rates are incredible, the 95% or something, and that's not necessarily showing me that we've got a real, game. And it might just be that maybe everybody who goes, to that part of their legal system is guilty. I don't know. But more likely, I would think that you just don't have the ability to really do anything on the other side to make the government be held accountable. And believe it or not, in some instances, the government lies. And people who are government officials and are supposed to be taking care of all of us, right? I'm a member of society. They lie. And it might just be because they're having a bad day. It might be because they're some bad person. And it's the criminal defense lawyer's job to make them prove it. Make them prove it. Otherwise, the government has incredible resources, and you and I and everybody else, what can I do if the government comes after me with all the money and all the resources they have? So I think it's a noble good for any lawyer to be in the system doing really anything, because it's all, at least in the U.S., incredibly stressful. And it should be stressful. It shouldn't be easy. You shouldn't get a case and think, I represent the government. I don't have to worry. I win 100% of the time. Well, then you don't really have law, right? It's already fixed. And as a defense lawyer, it's hard. It's hard because, sometimes the government has not done what they're supposed to, and they're violating people's rights. But sometimes your client, the government did do what they're supposed to, and your client really did the wrong thing. And there's not much you can do to, about that, because there's evidence, and all you can try to do is get a good outcome from them, the best outcome you can. But it's not going to be great, because they made really bad choices. So all of that to explain the criminal defense system, to explain generically. What is our topic today? I've been pulled over by the police. Now what? Part of the reason I went through that long explanation is I can't give a generic answer because it depends on where you are in the world, and it depends on what type of police. I know when you travel a lot internationally, or you live in different parts of the world, different parts of your year, you're fully aware of going through immigration. Some of the federal law enforcement and some of their rights are going to be a little bit different. So when you're going through immigration points, in your vehicle, it's going to be a little bit different if you've been pulled over by what you're calling generically police, but they're actual federal officers or immigration officials, and they start asking you questions. It's going to be a little bit different, slightly, than if you're sort of inside a country and dealing with different levels of law enforcement, what your rights are. But let's talk about big picture. First of all, the first thing you want to do is when you get in a vehicle, you need to know what's in that vehicle. So as pretty much everything that we do for programs, I always try to see what can we do on the preventative side before we get to the reactive side. So on the prevention side, before I even get in a car and get moving in that vehicle, I want to know what's in there, so that if I do get pulled over by the police, whether it's at an immigration stop, at a checkpoint, or it's within a nation, I know what's in the vehicle. And why am I saying this? Because I've had cases as a lawyer, where people say they lent their car to a friend or a relative, and, they got in the car to drive somewhere, and they didn't know there was a weapon in there. They didn't know there were illegal drugs in there. They didn't know there was, somebody kidnapped in the trunk of the vehicle. These things people say happen, and my personal life practice is I don't lend my vehicles to people that I don't know and trust. And even if I do, when I get the vehicle back, I go through it, just checking, okay, before I start driving it. Why? Because when the police pull over your vehicle, and if they do find something inside the vehicle that is illegal or not supposed to be there or not supposed to be in your possession, then you have a problem. And it's much harder to try to explain it on the reactive side. Now my lawyer is going to go and try to explain that I gave it to my cousin, and my cousin is the one who put that illegal contraband in the vehicle. It's much harder to fix that than it is to just prevent it. So just look in your own vehicle. And if it's not your vehicle and you're borrowing somebody else's, the same rule. Go through it. And try not to borrow other people's cars, or, but even if it's a rental car, right? That's one of the reasons rental cars at the airport or, wherever you pick them up at a rental car agency, there's nothing in there, right? I always open the trunk anyway, look inside, look underneath the seat. Look, I just don't want to have a problem. And it's not my stuff, then I definitely don't want to have a problem. So an easy way to prevent a problem with the police is make sure that there's nothing in the vehicle that's going to create a legal problem, and that's just on you. I don't care if it's your vehicle or somebody else's vehicle, or you're borrowing it or you're renting it. Check that vehicle out before you start driving around, and including look in the glove compartment and under the seats and everything, because if you don't do that and then something's in there, it's going to be much harder on the other end if you are arrested for that situation to try to, explain it than it is to prevent it. So that's my little 2 bits of sense there. The other thing is, why were you pulled over? So that's part of it, right? So the first thing that I've done proactively is I've ensured, to the best of my knowledge, at least something that's visible with the human eye is not in this vehicle, right? No weapons, no drugs, no contraband, no kidnapped people, no illegal paperwork showing that I'm in the midst of some, horrible fraud, just stolen credit cards, just like nothing in there, okay? So that's problem 1. Problem 2, I've been pulled over, right? What have you been pulled over for? So if you're at a border crossing, I mentioned earlier immigration, you're at a border crossing, it's different. Sometimes at border crossings, they're going to go and they're going to ask, often they ask every single car. It's a couple of questions. And ideally, you kind of need to answer. Now, do you have the right in most legal systems, especially in the U.S., do you have the right to remain silent? Yes, you do. But if you remain silent, then that's really not going to be really helpful for you, because you're at an immigration checkpoint. Don't go through an immigration checkpoint if you don't want to talk to the immigration officers, because then now they have what they're going to claim is probable cause to have an extended interview. What does that mean? All right, so you have the right to privacy in most parts of the world, at least in theory. That's your stuff, and that ideally the police, the government, just can't come, anytime they want and open my door to my house and break it down and walk all over my house and look at all my things and touch my things and do whatever they want. And ideally, they can't, while I'm driving around, just stop me and open my car and open my trunk and go through, the same idea. They can't just break in my house and go through all my stuff. They're not supposed to just stop every single car on the road and go through your stuff. What I'm arguing is that depends on where you are and what the reason they're pulling you over is. Like I said, the best thing is to make sure there's nothing in your car that's a problem. The other issue is don't give the police a reason to stop you. Now, again, if you don't want to go through some immigration security checkpoint, then don't go to the border. I mean, it seems really evident, but I have practiced in the southwest of the U.S. and the west, and definitely people go to other countries, especially Mexico, and they don't stop to think, like, uh-oh, it's in the vehicle. Like, are you serious? All right. The police are supposed to have a reason to pull you over, right? So one reason would be that you're crossing the border. Okay, that's what I just said. Another reason would be that they allege that they witnessed that you violated the law. Easy, common ones are things like speeding. Another easy one is that you don't have your license and your tags, registration stickers aren't current. So the easy way to prevent that problem is don't speed, right? Pay attention to what the speed limit is. And there's really starting to be no reason. Most cars, more modern cars, they have a little, you can set the car to go a certain speed. And they have software that will remind you what the speed limit is, where you are. There are things in many parts of the world called speed traps, which is where the speed limit will change really quickly. Usually go from a really, a higher speed limit to a really low one. It'll happen really quick. They're usually right around small towns that are near interstates. And they're usually set up because the idea is that these small towns can get a lot of revenue by stopping people at these traps where, the speed limit was, 65 miles per hour, and now it's, 25 miles per hour. It happened really quickly, and the police just sort of sit there and wait to catch somebody who didn't slow down fast enough, and then they give out all these tickets, and they make, all this money for their city. So the easy thing for that is there are apps that will help you, be aware of where those speed traps are. There are radar detectors. I'm not describing what jurisdiction these are legal and not legal in, but my argument simply is pay attention. Like, this isn't that hard. And I say that as somebody who admittedly likes to drive slowly. So I'm not maybe the best witness for this personally. I like to leisurely drive. I like to drive slowly. I like to have fast-performing cars that I drive slowly for whatever reason, but that makes me happy. So the speeding thing usually is preventable. Of course, if you're in an emergency, oh my goodness, I'm driving, my aunt to the hospital and she's literally, in labor at this minute, well, then that makes sense. And then the police will see, oh my gosh, there she is in labor. Okay, so that's a reason to speed, an exception. So the other thing is the tags, license, registration. Wherever you live in the world, there's usually some sort of a fee you have to pay the government to drive a vehicle. And they have some sort of sticker or something that they usually give you to prove that you're current on these fees. And if you're not current, then your little stickers are usually outdated. And a lot of police will just sit around looking for that, because when they see that, then they pull you over. Why did they pull you over? Not because you were speeding, not because you're at an immigration checkpoint, but because your little stickers are expired. That's an easy thing to prevent. Just check your little stickers. Usually, in most parts of the world, they're good for somewhere around a year or a couple months, and check them. And then when you get a new one, make sure hey, I need to get a new sticker when? And then that way there's no reason. What I'm trying to say is this. The less reason that the police have to pull you over, then the less problem you're going to have. And I'm trying to do a lot on that end, because that's the easier thing to do, to stop the police from pulling me over, than it is to have the police pull me over, and now I have to deal with the aftermath of them pulling me over. So keep your stickers and license plate and all that kind of stuff, whatever the government requires in your part of the world current. Follow whatever the rules are in your part of the world. I'm not talking about parts of the world where there's just total corruption, where police just pull you over because they're going to, get a bribe out of you. Or police, I can't give you any legal advice to deal with corruption, because it's not legal. It's corrupt. So if you live in that part of the world and the police pull you over because of corruption, and that's time to pay the bribe, and that's just sort of how the world works and where your part of the world is, then I can't give you any advice other than do what their system says to do, I guess. I don't know, unless, and change politically until they stop the corruption. Because there's no way to stop it, because the whole point is it wasn't allowed to begin with. All right. So we're back dealing with people who are parts of the world where we have rule of law, right? That's why we're law lovers, because the law is not just words on a piece of paper. The law actually is, in theory, followed. I went through my whole preamble or opening part in this show talking about the defense lawyer's job is to make the government follow the law. That's really what their job is. Okay. So now you've been pulled over and you weren't speeding but your registration sticker was expired or whatever on your car. So you gave the police a reason to pull you over. The reason why I keep saying this is it's much easier in a system where there is rule of law if the police have no reason for the stop. They have no reason to stop you at all, right? So you're not at a border immigration checkpoint. You weren't speeding. You had no stickers, and the cops were just pulling you over anyway because they're corrupt or being discriminatory or something wrong. That's a much easier thing for a criminal defense lawyer to argue because they don't have a reason. And the good thing that's helping all of society, I argue, is that the proliferation again of technology. So I mentioned earlier, it helps us know if there's a speed trap coming up or a speed limit change. But also in policing, you're seeing more and more use of cameras and recording materials so that the stops are recorded. That helps everybody. It helps the police, the overwhelming majority of police, and I would argue in the world, but certainly I would argue in the U.S., overwhelming majority of them are just doing their job and trying to have a good day, and they're not out, doing illegal stuff. So the recordings help show for them, hey, I did what I was supposed to. That right there, person speeding, the tickets, the stickers expired. Now you have a recording of me saying legally why I pulled them over, which they're supposed to tell you ideally, right? So, often, though, what police will do is when they pull you over, the first thing you need to do when you see the police signaling is show that you see them signaling, and then begin to make your way safely to the shoulder or to a safe place to pull over. Do not flee. Do not run. If you do that, then I'm going to say what I told my clients as a criminal defense lawyer, you're an idiot. Like now what you're going to do, the moment you flee, then they're going to think, well, something horrible going on over there, and they're going to chase after you. And then they're going to call for backup to chase after you. And you're going to endanger other people's lives, endanger your life, endanger the police officers' lives. For what? For nothing. Like if you didn't do what we already talked about and do your check and make sure nothing's in that vehicle, or that other people in the vehicle don't have things on them that'll create problems for you, then yeah, you might be in trouble. But now it's time for you to face that fact. So there you go. Just pull over safely. Then, especially, depending on what you look like, don't misunderstand how this works, right? So raise your hands. I've had illegal stops in my life. I had one time I was in the car with my male relative, young male relative, and we're, sort of different colors than I guess the majority population in our country, whatever. I'm trying to say nicely. We had an illegal pull. We were pulled over illegally because I don't speed, right? And my stickers were correct. I was driving, and the police officer is female. I asked, so police officers are supposed to ideally tell us why they're pulling us over because they're supposed to have a reason, right? And but a lot of them will come up to your car and immediately say something like, "Hi, do you know why I pulled you over today?" And remember, you need to do one thing when you're pulled over by the police and you have any other interaction with the police. You need to either completely shut up, that's your right to remain silent, which means to shut up. Or if you feel pretty comfortable that you can say, some minimal basic things, you can talk, but you need to say very little. So it's not helpful for you to give them some long reason about why you think they pulled you over, because usually if you keep talking, you're going to give them evidence against you, so just shut up. So the lady asked me when I was driving around with my male relative, it was like an evening time, so that it wasn't dark, but like the sun was setting. And she said something like, "Oh, do you know why I pulled you over?" And I said what I always say, which is no, because that's A, the truth, and B, I'm not going to talk and give them evidence against me when I haven't done anything wrong. And this was an illegal stop, meaning she had no probable cause. And so then she stops and she says something like, "Oh, well, I pulled you over because the license plate on your car didn't have a light on the license plate or something." I mean, first of all, it wasn't dark, and secondly, that wasn't true, but I believe she pulled us over because of our skin color, and that she just felt like she needed to see what we were doing driving around. That's what I think. I've had this problem with illegal stops more than once, and it's incredibly infuriating every time it happens because, as we just talked about, I don't speed. I always have my stickers current. I'm a taxpayer. I'm an attorney. Like, really? It actually hasn't happened recently. So, knock on wood, maybe it's happening less and less, or maybe I moved to a different part of the country, but it's just infuriating when it happens. It really is. But I want the police to have to come up with some kind of lie when they pull me over illegally, and then if I have to, I'll be able to take them and make them be held accountable for their illegal stops. Now, this is a minority of things that happen. Of course, the majority of police never do these types of things, but it does happen. It's happened to me on multiple occasions, and it's always upsetting. It makes me angry when it happens. All right, so the police have pulled me over. I don't have anything in my vehicle that's illegal or contraband. I make sure the people I ride in my vehicle don't have anything on them illegal or contraband. This makes just basic sense in life. So when I got pulled over illegally, they asked me, do I know why they pulled me over? I do say no, because there's no reason, and I want them to have to tell me some kind of lie. So remember, when they pull you over, they're going to signal immediately. Find a safe space, show them, put your blinker on, show them that you're pulling to the side. Especially for those of us who do get pulled over, because I guess we fit the profile of a criminal. We have the wrong color, or we're in the wrong type of car in the wrong place, or whatever that is. That's a large societal issue that I'm trying to do everything I can to be part of a solution. In the interim, put your hands up, right? Because there's always this thing where you have to remember, people who are police officers are incredibly. I admire them. A lot of criminal defense lawyers have a really kind of negative view about law enforcement in general. I don't. I always think that, I'm glad somebody does this, and I want a police officer that's, going to come help me. If I call 911, somebody's trying to do something bad to me, come help me, right? I just don't like when people violate the law, because then you're not helping me and you're wasting time on this violation where you could have been out catching some sort of criminal somewhere. But anyway, so since I know that I'm the wrong or fit the profile of the bad, whatever people perceive to be a bad person, always put your hands up so that police officers claim they can see them. You have a lot of things where police officers are frightened, and they'll hurt somebody, or they'll use a weapon because they claim that they thought somebody was reaching for a weapon, even though the person didn't even have a weapon. Just put your hands up so they can see them. Not hold your hands up like you've been, like you're in a movie. Okay, I don't have any weapons, but literally put your hands on the steering wheel, both of them, so the police claim they can see them. Hopefully, the police have their little video camera and audio running, so everyone can see later that you did everything beyond the right way, and they either did their job the right way or they didn't. So put your hands up. Remember, they start talking. You're going to say either nothing, or you're going to say very short things like no, yes. So put your hands up. If they're in the vehicle in the U.S., they're always going to ask you for your license and registration. So have your hands up, and then I usually look at them and say, I'm going to reach for my license and registration. Because remember, I don't want them to claim that they thought I was reaching for a weapon and they tase me or shoot me or something. So then my license and registration, I hand that to them, and I sit there in my vehicle. I do not get out. I've actually never had the police ask to search a vehicle. I think part of that is, again, if there's that, something that they claim is in plain sight that might be a potential criminal situation or a weapon. Also, remember this: you have a right to privacy in the U.S., but the police claim, if they claim they have probable cause, they're going to be able to get probably a warrantless search of your vehicle approved. What does that mean? In theory, they're supposed to go to a court and ask for a search warrant to be able to come to your private area where you have an expectation of privacy, like your home. Typically with vehicles, they're going to have a little bit more leeway, especially in the courts, to say, hey, I didn't have a warrant to search their vehicle, but I pulled them over. They were sweating profusely. When I asked them why I pulled them over, they said they don't know who I am, and they were, and then they said an obscenity towards me. I thought I saw a glint of a weapon, on the bottom of the floor of their car, and I also thought I smelled the odor of an illegal substance, and so, as there was evidence, I had probable cause of an imminent, crime, I then searched the vehicle, and that's why it was warrantless. So my argument simply is, that's why I said don't have any stuff in the car, of obviously yourself. Don't be intoxicated or on drugs or anything of that nature. I've done so many of those as a lawyer, right? Driving while intoxicated, driving while drunk cases. Just don't drive drunk or intoxicated. It's dangerous. There's no need for it. Just sit wherever you are and be drunk and wait until the next day and get a cab, or to have somebody come pick you up or whatever. Or plan ahead, right? Take a cab or whatever. Being drunk is not good for your health, but if you're not a minor, it's not illegal. It's just the driving part, so just don't do that. So again, hands up. When they ask me questions, I usually give like a no, and I just sit there and look at them. Don't curse them out. Don't yell at them. Remember, they're people. Right? So the more you make it hard on them, then they're going to go make it hard on you. Don't do this. It's a total waste of your time. The one thing that I want to do is get my life back on and get back on my way. So I don't want to sit around here with some police officer wasting my time on nothing. And you do have the right to remain silent, But remember this: now not at immigration checkpoints typically, but just sort of within local law enforcement. But when you pull that on cops, on police officers, and you say, "Oh, my right to remain silent, I'm not going to say anything." Okay, fine, but and you don't answer the basic stuff, then they just get more and more curious, and it usually isn't helping you. So just give them short answers: yes, no, I'm not sure, no. If you're not under arrest, remember that you're free to leave, but you have to clarify whether or not you're under arrest. I want to go ahead and thank you for joining me for this episode. You can always come to CourtneyAnderson.com, and I am going to go ahead and provide another follow-up episode to this show. Thank you.